Okay, so hello, I'm Dr. Ethan Morgan. I'm an assistant professor from the University of Sussex in the United Kingdom.
Hi, my name is Dr. Balkiss Abdelmoula. I'm a family physician from Tunisia, based in Germany, and I'm also the Tunisian ambassador in IPVS.
Hi, my name is Dave Hawkes. I'm from the Australian HPV Reference Lab at the Australian Centre for Prevention of Cervical Cancer Control, and this is day 3. It's all becoming a bit of a blur, and I started off at 8 o'clock this morning looking at self-collection and how that's being applied to different areas, low and middle income countries, but also the quality framework around it. So it's like everyone's talking about self-collection, but it's like it's not. You don't just put things in and get stuff out. And as a lab person, that was, it's really nice to see that we're kind of, no one's questioning self-collection anymore. They're just kind of like, okay, how do we make sure that it's robust? How do you make sure that this is going to work in a variety of environments? But yeah, how did you start the day?
Well, not that much difference. It's still about screening. I had to talk about screening in the region that I come from, which is the Middle East and North Africa. And then there's another talk in the afternoon about HPV adult vaccination. So it's other new topic like the self-sampling topic they've just mentioned. The HPV vaccination so far is only in 9 countries out of 22 in my region, and it's only basically for girls, except for 4 countries that have optionally introduced boys, but not still for adults, except from few cohorts. So a long way to go so far.
So I started it off with more basic science. I'm a basic scientist, so I was more looking at the talks that are looking at novel treatments and whether or not we can use them for a range of different carcinomas, so targeting HPV itself instead of targeting a specific cancer itself. So a more pleiotropic mechanism that we could hopefully apply, which has the added benefit of using the mouse papillomavirus in vivo models, because they're so similar related to HPV itself. But one of the things I find really interesting about this meeting is, so I know nothing about self-sampling. I know very little about HPV screening itself. But coming somewhere like this makes me realize that how important it is. So one question I have for you in terms of diagnostics, how likely is it that people contaminate their self-samples? And how much impact does that have on how you can actually use them in terms of reliability, sensitivity?
So look, we've done over 400,000 in my lab, and we've tried to break them, and we're in 14 countries in Asia Pacific. So we deal with Australia, but we also deal with Nauru, which is one of the smallest countries you can go around the outside of it in 17.9 kilometres. So one of the things with self-collection is it has to be robust. So in terms of contamination, look, your hands, people go, but your hands are actually keratinized cells. They don't actually have nuclei. So when our HPV tests for cells, you can actually rub it in your hands for a minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, and there won't be sufficient cellular material to give you a false negative. It's the difference between a chlamydia test, which if there's no chlamydia, it's negative, and a HPV screening test where we test it, and if there's no HPV, we have to make sure there's enough sample. And the reason is your HPV, according to the WHO, could predict 10 years, your 10-year screening or your 5-year screening. So we always talk about it not being a diagnostic test because everybody gets HPV. It's a risk stratification test. And again, we're learning more about how, different HPV types react slightly differently in different areas. So HPV 52 and 58 are much worse in Southeast Asia than they are in Australia or in Europe. Look, I guess the thing is with the vaccination and the older vaccination, I'd be really interested to know what the discussions are about, because we know that when the vaccine is given to people who are not sexually naive, it's not a therapeutic vaccine. I'm sure there's been sessions on therapeutic vaccines, but I've missed those. Were there any discussions about sort of, whether or not the resources for an adult vaccine versus trying to adjust programs to those that are naive in boys and girls. How do you get that balance right?
Totally, that was exactly the kind of questions that were raised by the public health and experts and economists. A lot of them in the room in that discussion, because it was held by the World Federation for Public Health Associations, as they are leading this global action global call to action on HPV adult vaccination. And there was a lot of questions like this one, and one of the answers that was put there in the room was like there has to be data collected on those that have, like, the countries that had programs going on and the self-sampling going on at the same time. So there has to be this data collection system in place, which is not actually existing in many countries. So there's a lack of data on that, and some countries have the vaccination programs and do not have systematic screening programs. So there's a disruption there as well. And others, it's just starting with the vaccination as like part of the national immunization program. So it's all new to talk about results or evidence on that question, but it is a very important question to answer in the future. So it was put out there, and I think the call to action has to talk about this data need and this evidence need, so that later on the resource allocation is put in the right way. Like, it's not just about vaccinating everyone, and it's not like the governments are not going to deploy the HPV vaccination that they would be buying to all of the population. They have to be very well targeted. And in my country and the countries in my region, that they are starting with the WHO target group, which is the adolescent boys and girls. And by the way, in the same region, there is no population-based screening programs. It's all random, and it's all cytology-based, except for a few countries that have introduced HPV DNA testing, just 2 or 3, I guess. So it's like a big difference when we talk about, like, the setting is very much different. So I brought this perspective. I was the only one from other region, and it was interesting to also hear from what's going on in different other parts of the world. What do you think about?
Yeah, on that point, I think one of the things that I'm interested in is the HPV vaccination programs in boys. So I know from my perspective, where I'm in the UK, I know it's the same in the US and a lot of Western Europe, and maybe in Australia, I don't know as much, that these vaccination programs are starting in boys. Is that happening in, like, the more Southeast Asian areas that you do with? Is it happening in Africa? I don't know. So any information on that would be of interest.
Yeah, I'll be very quick on that. It's like the vaccination programs are all targeting girls when they start, except for 2 or 3 countries that have introduced GNV from the start, like Kuwait, Qatar, and Bahrain. UAE has it as an option for boys. It was the first one that did that, but that's all. Other than this, there is no other countries in my region that did that. And I'll pass it to David.
I have to defend my country. We had the first gender-neutral vaccination in 2013. Yep. So we're now seeing those boys who are vaccinated. I think we had a slight catch-up to 15. So that's 12 years ago. They're now sort of the late 20s, and we're sort of seeing that, you know, they were vaccinated about 75%. It was over 80% for girls. We've got the Gardasil 9 vaccine coming through. What we're sort of seeing with that is that we're kind of starting to see the trend, because we don't have screening in boys, but we are starting to see the trend in things like we've now got an anal cancer screening program, and we're understanding oropharyngeal cancers and penile cancers, which are obviously going to be affected by boys, but also the differences in the transmission, because the boys were not economically feasible to be vaccinated in Australia, but they were vaccinated for the purpose of interrupting transmission between girls. And we also have this unusual situation where our oldest vaccinated cohort have just started turning 45, because we had a catch-up program to 26 from 2007. So anyone who's just on the edge of Gen X, 1st of July 1980, was offered free vaccination. So with those sort of HPV faster and some of those things, we've actually got some of that data that we can actually look at what those effects are for those vaccinated post-school. So they would have been 26. The people turning 36 were vaccinated in high school, but at 17, 18. And so that I guess gets to the point where I think we're all getting to, is that I used to be a basic scientist, but it's been a very long time. I'm not a population health or a physician, but we have to deal with those. And I think it's that interaction between these different areas. Like we're talking to people who are doing community-based screening at the Rose Foundation in Malaysia, where they go door to door to get the self-collector samples, but then we're dealing with the IT people who have the registries that can follow up on them. And in Malaysia, they prefer WhatsApp, so they're actually sending their message via WhatsApp. But then we're just kind of going, but why 52 and 58 in Malaysia? We want to understand, is it a genetic background? It is a viral background? It is an interplay we don't understand about? And yeah, so I think that's my takeaways from the IPVC Day 3. Any last thoughts from you?
Well, I think the key word here is multi-stakeholder interaction, multi-stakeholder and also cross countries and cross regions learning. It's been really amazing to see, to learn from each other here in IPVS conference.
Yeah, I would reiterate that sentiment, and collaboration between the basic sciences, the clinicians, and the more population science epidemiologists is really important to figure this all out.